Hi, I'm Carmen,
And I'm Steven, and this is Vienna Past and Present.
where we walk through the gilded and sometimes not so gilded halls of Vienna's history.
So, Carmen, what is our topic today?
It's a really sexy one today for you, Steven. We're going to be talking about public toilets.
And I'm excited. I'll admit, I did that thing I did in some high school history classes where I read ahead kind of secretly like the night before because I was that cool. So yeah, I looked up a few things to share today too.
Okay, very good. Yeah. Do you want to set the scene for us? Where are we talking about toilets here? What period of time are we in?
So, setting the scene, it's turn of the century, fin de siècle Vienna. So that's late 19th, early 20th century. It's like a time of modernity, artists, intellectuals. They were kind of throwing out the old traditions, dramatically, kind of radically reinventing the city. It's a time of innovation in art, architecture, music, literature, and even psychoanalysis. It was really dramatically changed during this time. It was a high point of Austrian cultural history. Politically, it was still the Habsburg Empire. It was Kaiser Franz Joseph as the emperor at this time, and it turns out in fin de siècle Vienna, people were urinating and defecating.
Imagine that. So around this time, right, so around the 1860s, the need for some kind of establishment to take care of your needs, which has a great Austrian name, or German name, which is öffentliche Bedürfnisanstalten.
Rolls right off the tongue.
How's that for you, Stephen? You want to give that one a go?
Right. I'll do that silently in my head. Okay.
Okay. There'll be a quiz next time.
Yes.
So yeah, öffentliche Bedürfnisanstalten, or establishments for taking care of your needs, kind of came up in the 1860s. And there were other cities. So Vienna was not at the total forefront of this. So in Berlin, for example, there were already some public toilets that had been established. And a businessman from Berlin, whose name was Wilhelm Beetz, had been part of the scene in Berlin and then came to Vienna to request a license to set up some public toilets in Vienna.
Okay.
So he kind of had to fight for this a little bit, but he got one pilot toilet approved in 1883. So he got one license basically to set up a toilet, which I like, starting
pilot
off with a little,
toilet.
a little pilot project. And it ended up being very popular. People used it and, really appreciated that it was there. And so he was then granted a 10-year contract that allowed him and his company to build public toilets around the city, but completely at their own cost. It does remind me of a time when you and I were hiking, and there was also a need for, you know where I'm going with this, yes?
Yeah, it's where you always go with this.
Where I always go with
Not
this.
over the fact that I can't just pee, while making eye contact with my friends. Okay? Which is, I think, what...
We had not seen any other person for 72 hours, and you spent 30 minutes trying to find an appropriate or a place that was good enough for you to pee, and then you had to consult with us about whether this was correct, the right place or not.
You're talking like someone who had a spoonful of peanut butter, that entire day. You were calorically not well. All right. And for you, it was 30 minutes. It was probably 90 seconds is how I choose to remember that.
Okay, well, we're going to agree to disagree on this one because it was at least 25 minutes of you pottering back and forth and pacing around trying to find the right spot. And just nothing was good enough for you is what it turned out to be. So maybe you could have used a Wilhelm Beetz to, build you a nice public toilet that you could use on the mountain someplace.
Yeah, this speaks to the importance of public toilets, okay? Let's not derail this, okay, with one of your stories. Let's stay on topic, okay? Anyway.
I just wanted to bring up that anecdote because...
Thank you, Carmen.
For a few of our listeners, they will appreciate.
Right, so
because they
all
were there
5
as well.
listeners will now share in my shame, okay? Anyway, so... Here's where you might be asking, what existed before public toilets came to be? Okay, enter the Madame Toilette, the Butenmänner, Butenfrauen, if I, botched that, well enough that anybody can understand.
Close enough.
Okay. Okay. Anywho, the Romans, they had public toilets with running water, but this technology was lost with the fall of the Roman Empire. Public toilets only returned in the 19th century, really. In the meantime, there were men and women whose profession it was to basically provide a public mobile toilet, which was just a bucket. They usually wore masks. They walked through the streets with large buckets that were chained to a yoke that they carried across their shoulders. When people wanted to relieve themselves, these toilet men would shield them from the public with large capes. The urine was then used in saltpeter production, in tanneries. The collectors made money by selling this waste to industry. I never knew about this. It's kind of wild to think that there were mass people with poop buckets just walking around town.
Yeah, different time. I didn't know about this either. I learned about it sort of in the research for this episode. And I, first of all, didn't know that public or, running water or toilets with running water had sort of been lost for 1,000 years or something since the Romans had it. And then it just kind of disappeared, that knowledge somehow, which is already kind of crazy to me that it existed so early and then somehow died for a long time.
Yeah, I wonder if there's more to that, right? But then it's like, I remember these stories, you hear like Dickens stories or something, right? Where it's like, oh, someone's dumping their chamber pot, just out in the street. So yeah, I guess I had a sense of that, but, maybe I just had never researched toilets enough. So thank God we did.
We're doing the Lord's work here now. Yeah. But yeah, that's why you got all the cholera epidemics and stuff, right? Was because there just was no real system of hygiene for these things. And then I guess by the late 19th century, they realized that, the Romans actually knew what they were doing back in the day. Maybe we should figure this out again. So poop buckets were basically out by the 1880s, and public toilets were slowly making their debut. And initially, it wasn't really all that easy for Bates to get his licenses for his toilets. So there were long debates and discussions about whether he should be granted this privilege or not. And there were pretty big protests by the local population, actually. And a lot of the suggested locations where he had wanted to build these toilets had to be scrapped because either there was resistance from the police, the church, or local residents. So there were quite a few different parties that resisted these public toilets and especially resisted the locations where they had wanted to build them.
Yeah, and I looked into why the church was resistant in particular. According to our up-and-coming overlord ChatGPT, the church had, quote, moral concerns about people relieving themselves outside of their homes, especially women, of course. They were concerned with modesty and privacy. The genders might encounter each other doing private acts. Bodily functions like this were only private at this time. They thought it could facilitate lewd conduct. The church also had a role in defining public and private spaces in this era too. So for them, this was like taking something they told everyone was private, turning it into like a public utility. So that challenged like, the whole moral framework for them. Culturally, more broadly, like bodily functions were just not discussed in polite society at this time. So yeah, that was kind of what it was going up against and like what the church was sort of, responsible for, quote unquote, maybe at this point. So yeah, over time that changed, better scientific understanding of hygiene that eventually, won out. But anyway, back to our story.
Right. And the church angle is kind of interesting. The police and the local residents, I think, are maybe more obvious somehow, but very similar reasons, right? They feared crime and people congregating, especially also drunk people kind of loitering around these areas and collecting there. And the church, I guess, from what you looked into, was concerned about polite society and keeping the moral ethics.
There's no talking about this thing that we do 10 times a day. Okay, so where was the first of these immoral places built, Carmen?
So the background on this is that the very first public toilet, the first ones that were built were all above ground, and the very first one opened in Vienna in 1884 in front of the old stock market. And these initial ones were made of wood. They were kind of fairly simple. But then with time, there was also discussion and debates about the look of the city and having it, have a less obvious public toilet look and sort of fit better into the general look of the city. And so the wooden ones, I guess, were not particularly nice. They were like little huts. And so with time, Bates then offered to make them out of iron. so that they would look similar to tramway stops and sort of fit into what the other city infrastructure looked like. And to me, I looked some of these up, and some of them actually still remain. There's a few, like around the ring, that still exist that are these old style iron ones, and they really kind of look like semi fancy shipping containers to me.
Okay.
Effectively a shipping container with a bit of decorative flair around it.
Oh, okay. And these are the old ones? Look like shipping containers?
These are the old ones.
Okay.
Yeah. From the 1880s. So already at that time they were prefabricated, so they were pretty quick and easy to install, which was also a pretty new way of approaching this kind of thing. And yeah, some of them still exist. There's one at Stubentor, which is at the south end of the inner city, and they're in operation. So
Okay.
stood the test of time. One thing that was also sort of modern for its time is that they included toilets for women, which hadn't really existed before.
Wow.
Yes. Breaking real new ground here.
Yeah.
So urinals had already existed from about the 1860s, and it would only be with this first public toilet in 1884 that women were considered and that women actually also had a place. Although I will say that even to this day, it's a bit discriminatory. On the one hand, that was sort of modern to have a female section, but to this day, I kind of think that they're discriminatory because the women always have to pay when they use these. And for men, there's always a urinal section and like some stalls, and the urinals are free. And so it kind of does discriminate against women still because the women always have to pay no matter what, and the men mostly don't have to pay.
Yeah, weird.
So not sure we've advanced so far from that time, but
Yeah, you're almost there. All right.
slowly.
Right.
But yeah, so these first iron ones that he built became a template for almost all of the above ground public toilets that were then built in the next years, and he built quite a lot of
Okay.
them. So they really sprung up all over the city, and they all sort of had the same look and the same layout to them. So they sort of had 4 cabins for men, 4 cabins for women, 6 urinals, and then there was always a small room in between for the attendant, because there was always an attendant there. You had to pay, and they would also make sure that it was clean and that it was
Okay.
kept in an orderly fashion. And in these early ones, there were also first and second class cabins, which I think is kind of interesting,
Oh.
that you have like first class toilets. And so the first class ones, the fancier ones, had a sink, a mirror, and a spittoon, which is very old timey.
Nice. Yeah.
Which I don't even know exactly what that is. Is that just like a thing you spit into
I think so. Yeah.
for
That's
like tobacco or something?
yeah, or you just have something you need to like hawk up and spit.
Oh God, hawk up. That's such a gross word.
I'm not a huge spitter myself, but yeah. I didn't want us to leave out one of Beats's most important inventions. That's a quotation. What he called the oil urinal. It seemed to me like a major improvement over the bucket situation as well.
Right. So one of the issues with all of this was that you had the problem of odors and also a large amount of water being used for the urinals. For these urinals that existed kind of these early urinals that I mentioned before, they required about 300 liters of water per hour, which was very expensive, and also had the problem that in winter they would freeze. And of course you had odors that came with it, and so you had to sort of deal with that somehow. And Beats then developed an oil that disinfected and deodorized urinals, which was very effective and cheap and didn't require any water. And so he became very successful with that, and patented that. That was his sort of major contribution in terms of a technological advance. And he started building public toilets all around the city. And by 1939, he had built 139 public toilets around Vienna. So they kind of sprung up all over the place. And as a fun little aside, fun fact, the company, the Wilhelm Beetz company, still exists to this day, and public toilets are still their main business. So they've kept it going.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it was a long road from 0 to 139, but yeah, that's interesting.
Not that many exist anymore today. They've reduced a lot of them again, but 139. Actually, I think there may have even been more at the peak of their building era.
Yeah, toilet dominance.
Their toilet dominance.
Okay.
And now it's less again, but you still have them around the city.
Okay. So this is Vienna past. It's Vienna past and present. If we try to tie this to Vienna today, if you wanted to experience this history, how can we do that, Carmen? You've mentioned a few locations. Is there a toilet walking tour?
I don't think there's a toilet walking tour, but I think there should be one. I looked this up to see if there were any tours like that, because there are some pretty interesting toilets around the city, but I didn't find anything, so that might be a little business idea. But you can experience a lot of these toilets still today, and I want to talk about one in particular, one that's quite a special one. So one that still comes from this time when the vast majority of the public toilets, or pretty much all of them, were built above ground because it was much cheaper and easier to build.
Okay.
But Beats did also build a few underground ones.
All right. I hope you're sitting down, everyone. The world's oldest underground toilet is in Vienna. See what I did there? Chirps.
Crickets.
Crickets.
Pause for
chirping.
laughter.
Yeah.
All right, yeah. So that is correct. The world's oldest underground toilet is in Vienna, and it still exists, and you can still go there. It was built near the St. Stephen's Cathedral, so that's the very center of the city. And there's a street just next to it that's called the Graben, and this underground toilet was built there in the Graben. And initially, it was supposed to be a lot closer to the cathedral. It's now, I would guess, about 500 meters away from the cathedral. It was supposed to be quite a bit closer initially, but there was a lot of resistance, protest by the church. Like we said before, they were concerned about, sinful behavior.
It was going to be, this house of immorality near the cathedral. Okay, so now you know why there's a walk. Okay.
Right, so you got to take a little walk because, the church always kept things really above board.
Right.
So anyway, they had to build it a respectable distance, quote unquote, from the church. And so, it's kind of a couple hundred meters away. So the toilet was open to the public in 1905, and it was built in an Art Nouveau style. And it's the only remaining Art Nouveau public toilet in the city, and it has protected status now.
Yeah, I just love that idea, an Art Nouveau public toilet. It's like, I think, sculpture or like architecture, like a building exterior, but a toilet? Yeah, I'm definitely going to Google.
It's really gorgeous, I have to say. I avoided this place for a long time. A lot of people don't even know it's there, actually, because it's very unobtrusive how it's built. It's just this sort of... There's two lanterns and then just these stairs down underground. But you don't really even notice it. It's in a super touristy part of town, probably the most touristy part, but it's very discreetly built, I have to say. I've actually mentioned this toilet to people occasionally, people who live here, and they sometimes don't really know what I'm talking about because it's just built in this way where you don't necessarily notice it very much.
That sounds like pretty ideal for a toilet, so yeah, cool.
Yeah, but I avoided it for a long time because I thought it was just dodgy because it went underground, and I thought oh God, I don't know what's happening down there, and it just seems like it's going to be somehow really shady.
Yeah.
And so it kind of didn't even cross my mind to go down there, but I must have been in the city at some point when I really had to pee, or I don't know, for whatever reason I went there, and then it was amazingly beautiful. And for me, it's how I imagine the toilets on the Titanic would have looked. Like sliding.
Wow.
Well, I'll talk a little bit more about the materials and stuff that were used, but yeah, it's like sliding wooden doors with glass and gorgeous handles and lighting fixtures, and it just feels very luxurious for an underground public toilet in the middle of the city.
Cool.
So, and it probably, I have to say, I feel like it's probably one of the most beautiful public toilets in the world. So if you're going to check out a public toilet, make it that one.
Huge claims in this episode. Okay, cool. Yeah.
I stand by it. It's up there.
Yeah, put this on your list, everyone.
Vienna also has, in my view, the world's nicest trash incinerator, which is a separate story, but also very beautiful.
Oh, gosh. All right.
So maybe we'll do an episode about all the weird random buildings.
Okay, let's move right along here. Okay.
So the basic setup is the same as a lot of the other public toilets. So you have kind of this room for the attendant in the middle, and then you have some cabins on the one side for the women, and some cabins on the other side for the men, and some urinals. And like I said, they used really high quality materials when they were building this. The doors and the cabins are made out of oak wood. The toilet seats are made out of teak wood. All the door handles are made out of brass, and apparently this is no longer the case, but the women's side apparently used to even have 2 aquariums in it.
Wow. Okay, and it kind of makes me wonder, what was in there? Like trout? Like, you know what I
I
mean?
wonder too.
What kind of all-weather aquarium fish in like 1900?
And let's not forget the
Yeah.
underground aspect. I mean, there is no
Yeah.
natural light.
Impressed.
Yeah. So the aquarium, I can confirm, does not exist anymore.
Too bad.
And it was quite expensive to build this whole thing with all of these materials, of course. So the total cost was 72,000 crowns at the time, which was quite a lot. And I tried to convert that. The Austrian National Bank actually has a very cool historical currency calculator on their website where you can put in these historical costs, and it calculates based on, because the currency that was used in the Habsburg Empire changed like 100 times. And so
Oh,
it will kind of, adjust to whatever actual currency was used in the year that you put in, and will give you a calculation for today. So according to that, the 72,000 crowns that it cost at the time would be about 580,000 euros today for one public toilet.
wow.
So that's pretty steep, I would say.
Yeah.
And the cost of use was about 2 crowns, which Beats considered to be extremely cheap. But according to that same historical currency calculator, that would be about 16 euros today, which that's a lot.
Wow. Yeah. But then I guess you think about your options, right? You're like dressed in all your finery or something, and it's an emergency, there's an aquarium. I don't know. Maybe I would pay it. But yeah. Wow. That's not what I thought. Okay.
Yeah, I guess you didn't have that many other options.
Yeah.
But I will say, most things seem like they would be way more expensive today than back in the day. But it costs 50 cents now if you go. And it seems to be very inflation proof because it was 50
Yeah.
cents 10 years ago too. Like, they have not changed the price. And I think that's probably the only thing in the city that has the same price as, 10 or 15 years
Okay.
ago.
All right.
So I wanted to show you a quick picture, actually, Stephen. I don't know.
Okay.
You're not familiar with this toilet, right? I don't think you went there when you visited.
No. So I'm going to Google it right now and see. Yeah. Wow. It's like very pretty. It's one of these spaces that's kind of designed like from head to toe, kind of. The ceiling is pretty. Every fixture is pretty. Yeah. All these like sliding doors that look really cool. I'm impressed by the maintenance of this. You know what I mean? Like, wow. It makes me want like a Beats toilet in my home. Okay. Super pretty. Yeah, it's worth looking at. We can put a link or something in the show notes here.
Yeah, we can put a link. It's like luxury and
Yeah.
glamour somehow. I mean, I think if I just saw the photo and didn't know what it was, if the door, all the sliding doors were closed, I mean, I would not guess that it was a toilet.
Not at all. No. I mean, it looks spa-ish, maybe? Like if I had to guess. Wow.
Yeah, so if anybody's visiting in Vienna, or if you're out and about in town and you have, even if you don't need to go to the bathroom, honestly, I would seek it out and just go for the history of it and for the beauty of it. And I have to say, for myself, I do sometimes go there, even if I really don't have to pee when I'm
Wow.
in the area, because I'm just like, oh, I just want to go check it out. And 50 cents is a good deal these days.
That's right. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, Carmen, so final question. What is the state of Vienna's toilets today? Like, we have walkability scores for neighborhoods. What is Vienna's pee ability score, if you will?
Oh, wow. Pee ability score.
Like, you're downtown, you have to go. Is it like it's, planned to look for 1 hour or what?
No. I think there's lots of places to go. Of course, restaurants are sort of my first go-to. Just walk in with confidence.
Okay, so you can do that there.
Well, I
All
don't know
right.
if they really love it, but I do it all the time. Just walk in with purpose and act like
Okay.
you belong there.
Classic.
There are some places that try to charge you, of course. But especially if you're in the city center, you do have a couple of these public toilets as well that are just really beautiful and really nice.
Okay.
And they are not always open. So, I mean, they are open every day, but
Hmm.
they have opening hours from, I don't know,
Oh,
like
okay.
something like 8 a.m. probably until 8 p.m. because there's always an attendant there. So, middle of the night, you're going to have a harder time.
Okay, and you just like,
And
okay,
bring
like just bring
coins, yeah.
coins.
Vienna is a very cash-based society, so you're paying in coins.
All right, good to know. I feel like we've provided some good history, some practical
This is how you
knowledge.
survive the city. Yeah,
Okay.
this is like the real information that you need.
Yeah, this is everything someone needs to like live and pee in Vienna.
These are the essentials, indeed. Yeah.
Okay, anything else?
No, I think that's it for our show. So thank you for listening. And if you liked what you heard, then please share with your friends or leave us a 5-star review. And if you didn't like it, then, well, don't worry about that review.
Right. You can find us on social medias, Vienna Past and Pres on Instagram, or send us your episode ideas at viennapastandpresent@gmail.com.
Auf Wiedersehen, pfiat euch, Baba.
Bye.